Hello, world. Welcome to the Breakout Finder podcast. I'm your host, Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageedJew. And with me, as always, is Mr. Ryan Lopes. You can find him on Twitter at StillRyan5. And back with us yet again, a absolute fan favorite, Mr. Nick Ercolano. You can find him on Twitter at Nick_BDGE. How is it going?
It's going good, man. I think you could probably thank Leonard Fournette for my appearance on the show today. Listen, I'm not even firing from the hip right now, starting off with the Leonard Fournette stuff. When Ryan reached out to me originally, he was like, "Yo, come on, this was last weekend or last week. You know, come on the podcast." I said, "Yeah, maybe. Like, we'll see how Leonard Fournette does this weekend, you know. And if he does well, I wasn't really trying to do battle with you for like an hour and a half about Leonard Fournette. Right. And since Leonard Fournette decided to." You know, do Leonard Fournette things this weekend, I was able to come onto the podcast.
Wow. Yeah, you're starting off really early with this. I saw it, the thing is, you said you looked at the show sheet, and Ryan, being the sweetheart that he is, he put the Leonard Fournette talk all the way at the very, very bottom. But predictably, Nick, when you show up, of course, the week after we get a non-useful Leonard Fournette game, you fire
it's just meant
immediately.
To be, man.
No, it's fine. Listen, he's ignoring the fact that Leonard Fournette played well in week 2. I mean, are we going to act like that never took place, Nick?
We're not gonna have a Leonard Fournette discussion right now, boys. Are we? Or are we? Like, this is our both.
I'm
you guys
ready.
Are just like I can't even
Ryan,
keep you. I can't
hold
keep
my
you
earrings
separated.
and hold my purse.
We don't have to do it. The only reason I brought it up was, listen, if I'm gonna come onto a podcast, like, I want my intro to have a little flame to it. I don't want to be like, I'm good, things are crazy in this hectic world. I want to fucking do battle immediately.
You wanna make fun of Leonard Fournette off the dribble, no questions asked. Just get into it.
At the beginning, we could do it again in the fourth quarter. Like, I'm here for it all.
I don't give a fuck. Let's go right now. Let's talk about Leonard Fournette right now. Listen, so your contention, I mean, did you believe when Leonard Fournette was going through the situation in Jacksonville that he was going to end up getting cut? Were you on that side, or did you just believe he was just going to drag it out in Jacksonville?
No, like, I mean, if I was going to put my money somewhere, like, it definitely was not going to be thrown away onto him getting cut. That's trying to hit zero on the roulette wheel, if we're being honest here. My take was Jacksonville really showed their hands with, trying to move him, and it just got to the point where it felt like they didn't want to use him. They didn't like him, and maybe they were going to force him into that role again. But listen, like, in all seriousness, when he signed with the Buccaneers, I moved him above Ronald Jones in my season-long rankings. I wasn't going to be, just stuck into the take where my take was he was in Jacksonville, and I just didn't believe that he could succeed there, having the perfect cards dealt to him last year. And I felt like that was his ceiling, right? And maybe he'll get the volume again, but it wasn't a good look for his fantasy outlook last year. So I was like, it can't get any better. But moving over to Tampa Bay, like, I was way more excited about it in his outlook for 2020. So I moved him above Ronald Jones, and I'm not really anti-Fournette right now, despite coming off of the game this weekend. I just don't know if you want any part of this backfield. Listening to some people that know their stuff and follow the Buccaneers teams, they really believe that there's no featured back here. They believe that it's going to continue to be one bounces off the other. Maybe one gets the hot hand for a game, but that doesn't predict what's going to happen going forward. And we're seeing LaShawn McCoy getting an uncomfortable amount of passing work. So yes, Leonard Fournette, of course, has that game-breaking ability where he can, take that one to the crib at the end of the game and give you the fantasy points that Rojo probably can't. But it's just a backfield that I really don't want any part of right now.
I think, honestly, the reality of the situation is I like the talent Leonard Fournette. You haven't been the biggest fan of Leonard Fournette's talent. I thought things couldn't get worse if he left Jacksonville. And I don't think they have. I thought, like you said, Tampa Bay was a better situation. Here's the problem, though. Nobody believed that he was going to get cut except Evan Silva. Tip of the hat to the GOAT. He called it. He got cut. And he ends up going to Tampa Bay. Now, the problem was, as we entered the season, we heard Bruce Arians talking constantly about how Ronald Jones looks better. This is Ronald Jones' offense. He's going to be the starter. And we have heard him do this in the past, and it hasn't manifested. I think the problem is that Ronald Jones is still being given those opportunities. And I don't know how long this is going to go on for, despite the fact that we saw that Leonard Fournette game where he did exactly what you said he can do, which is break off big runs and tear off chunk plays. And I think that that's going to remain his role in this offense. But I agree with LaShawn McCoy getting an unreasonable amount of opportunity. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It feels incredibly muddy. I think that Fournette's a much better back than Ronald Jones, but why is Ronald Jones back in the mix? It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to continue to lean on Leonard Fournette in this offense, but people asked me this weekend if you'd start Leonard Fournette. I pretty much told most people I was uncomfortable starting him because I basically thought this is what was going to happen. I said, don't be surprised when Ronald Jones gets the most carries in this offense, and it's not for lack of talent with Leonard Fournette, but I think Bruce Arians has dug in on the fact that he believes Ronald Jones has the talent, and Leonard Fournette is this late addition, so who knows what's going to happen.
I think there's like two outcomes realistically here. There's best case scenario, and then there's what's most likely to happen. And I think most likely it's going to continue to be a running back by committee for the most part, but on Leonard Fournette's side, like, if there's one running back that can take a stranglehold on the backfield, it's Leonard Fournette. Like, there's no scenario in which Fournette completely gets phased out of the backfield. There is a scenario where that could happen to Rojo, though. And I think most people are in agreement with that. So if we're looking at strictly ceiling, like, this is something I kind of came onto this summer as well, because a lot of people love to talk about player ceilings. I think, like, the better question is, like, what's the player ceilings? But realistically, what's the likelihood that the ceiling actually comes to fruition? Like, that's the question I think we need to start asking ourselves more as fantasy players, because chasing ceiling is great, but if you keep shooting fucking blanks at ceilings and ceilings and ceilings, your roster is going to be filled with empty treasure chests. You know what I mean? So Fournette definitely has the best case scenario in his range of outcomes, where I don't think Rojo does at this point. But realistically, it's probably going to continue to be a committee.
Here's the other problem, though, with Leonard Fournette. I mean, Leonard Fournette has yet to be that back where he can be a low-volume guy and produce. I realize, again, in week 2 on like 12 carries, he put up a boatload of volume on some big touches. But Leonard Fournette's a guy where he needed the volume to get the, basically the statistical probability that he was going to rip one off. He's not a one-and-done guy. So these games when he's getting 5 carries, which are split up across 3 quarters, these games where he's getting 7 carries, which are split up across 2 quarters, it's just not enough volume for him to necessarily get going. So that's another problem. But I agree. I think there could be more of a committee approach here. But 100% agree, Leonard Fournette is the guy that I would want to own in this offense. In the end, Ryan, are you here?
I don't like either of these players. That was my take. And I'm just glad that we can get the Leonard Fournette juice. It was supposed to be on the show, but I'm glad we get out of the way right now.
I'm good to roll past this, Ryan. I know you're here to be the beautiful one in the picture, but I want to bring you in for the talk, man.
Wow.
Let's go.
Wow. All right.
I feel like I always show up dressed to impress.
Yeah, that wasn't even this was a literal opposite side of the show sheet. So, okay. So you're obviously well aware at this point, Nick, that we have had our first sort of announced COVID outbreak, and it's between Tennessee and Minnesota. The practice facilities have been shut down, and all this is going on. So what do you think the next step is from this point?
Man, like, I feel like as people whose livelihoods at this point kind of revolve around fantasy football, we've gone through so many feelings about how the season's going to play out. Like when the Marlins down in Miami, is that they're like the Miami Marlins still, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, when they had their outbreak in baseball and like 75% of their team caught COVID, I was like, there's no way we're having the football season. Like, it's not happening. And things like time passed by and things crept by. And I'm like, cool, like football is going to happen. And then I think we recently got to a point where I just like assumed we were going to be smooth sailing for the rest of the season. Like, no positive test, nothing. So I think we like kind of dug ourselves into a bad hole of like unreal types of optimism. Mm-hmm. And now we're getting hit with what we should have thought was going to happen all along. So at this point, I mean, there's nothing we could really do except kind of take it day by day from a practical logistical standpoint. If you're a fantasy player, you always have to assume worst case scenario. Like, you have to assume all 4 of these games are not being played this weekend and have backups, because if you don't do that and then it happens, you're going to be sitting with fucking multiple donuts in your lineup. And I'm in a league where I have fucking Ryan Tannehill going and Will Fuller in my lineup, a couple other players within those 4 games. And I'm like, dude, like, thank God my league expanded their regular roster spots to like 20 as opposed to the 16, referring to a season-long league, because it would be an issue otherwise. The other thing that sucks too, and I'm not really sure what they're going to do about this, the platforms, these guys whose games get moved around, you don't have the luxury of putting them on the COVID IR unless they test positive, right? Like, they just have to go onto your bench with a random bye coming out of nowhere, and you still have to pick up players without putting them anywhere, right? So that gets confusing. So like, I got nothing groundbreaking here other than taking it day by day and playing it worst case scenario as a fantasy owner.
Yeah, and I think I think in general, and Nick kind of alluded to it, I think the league has done a very good job as far as testing and through the first 3 weeks. And I think it's been so good to the point, like Nick was saying, that I think most fans, myself, I mean, us here, we probably just, hey, it's really going to be smooth sailing. We're kind of in the clear, boys. This is going well. And then obviously a little bit of a setback, a little bit of an outbreak. So it's, and going kind of piggybacking on Nick's point about these season-long leagues, and I find myself in the commissioner chair in a few of them, and I got a boatload of texts today. Ryan, what are we gonna do? And I kind of referred back to text that I sent earlier this summer. Was like, listen, if we're gonna put money in and we're gonna play football this year, you guys have to realize that this is gonna happen once, twice, a handful of times. Like, no one knows what the fuck's gonna happen. So you got to saddle up and play and be willing and able to kind of roll the dice every single week, knowing that there's very little control outside of, like Nick said, expanding bench spots, adding IR spots, doing all that stuff that you can do. But if the league's got to move games around or cancel, whatever it is, like there's certain things where you just don't have control over it, and it's gonna fucking suck most weeks. You're gonna end up, getting beat out of a game or whatever it is. But it's just this is the era that when this is COVID era football, I guess, and this is just the first of what I hope is the only one. But just feels like this could pop up any weekend.
With all the injuries that have already taken place this year, it's just like this one more potential sort of booby trap that fantasy gamers have to go through. Your teams are ruined. Everybody's team has dealt with some significant injury that is just throttled. I've had a team with Barkley and Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey and all these guys, and it's fucking wrecked. And so I'm a team that should have won, and now I'm on the outside looking in, and then you've got COVID mixed in here, and we knew this all along. It could pop up at any moment. Yeah. So like Nick said, play day by day with it and just make sure that you've got substitutes ready. Everybody's fucking guys are on IR, though, so what are you going to do? Now, everybody that listens to this show knows that Ryan is the one that makes the show sheets. Ryan's also typically one that gets the guests. He brought Nick on this week. Ryan wrote this question, and I've got a question mark over my head in like a thought bubble because it says Brian Hill better than Todd Gurley, question mark. Ryan, are you implying that you believe Brian Hill is better than Todd Gurley?
I, knowing that we had Nick on the show, Nick Liss, the resident Falcons fan here, I had to get a Falcons backfield.
Barely. I'm hanging on by a fucking thread right now. I said this to my friends last night. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
If for some fucking way, shape, or form, Adam Gase ends up in Atlanta, I'm done. I'm over. I'm in Vegas.
Imagine?
I'm in Vegas. My friends were like, "We'll call you a fraud, but we'll understand." That's it.
Yeah, everybody.
Again, and this is it's a surface level question. One would think, Todd Gurley, he's running off the name right now. But, last year we talked plenty about it this offseason, about the state of his knees, just the way he moves and runs. It unfortunately doesn't look like Todd Gurley anymore. And Brian Hill, I think, especially last week, and Nick, going to take the mic here in a second, like watching what I watched and the Hill runs that I watched, he looks like the better back currently right now on the Atlanta Falcons. So I don't know if that's just a matter of situation where, the Falcons are banged up at pass catcher and they need to, I don't know. To me, is the Hill an overreaction? The Hill statement an overreaction, Nick, or is that, does Gurley just kind of look like a shell of his former self?
Nah, I mean, he does. He looks terrible, but I don't know if I'm willing to say that Brian Hill's a better running back than Gurley at this point. I think what he does, he brings a different skill set. He brings something to the field that Todd Gurley doesn't, and that's valuable to the Atlanta Falcons as a football team. Brian Hill's got a lot of shortcomings as a running back too, though. Like, I don't know, his vision is questionable at times, and like he does burst out, the 35-yard touchdown every once in a while, which, like Todd Gurley at this point, he's capped at like a 14-yard run. Like that's the most excitement you're getting out of Todd Gurley right now. Yeah. But he's going to continue to get 12 touches in an offense that's scoring 30 points per game. And that's going to end up being more valuable than what Brian Hill does, right? We could be like, oh, Gurley's losing the passing work, but Brian Hill's leading the backfield with 6 receptions or 6 targets, and his target share is like 4.7%. So it's not necessarily like, oh, who's the one getting the targets, but it's like, does it even fucking matter at this point? So it's not a backfield that I really want any part of, and I'd be looking at sell Todd Gurley for anything I can get for him at this point. Not that anyone's really looking to buy, but Gurley's not a guy I want on my team. I wish we had we need a new metric, I feel like, for fantasy football. Like Gurley, we always talk about like value over expected fantasy points given. We need like a fun value meter because Gurley's like the least fun player to own on your team right now.
He really is.
I'm gonna do my rankings next year from like the most enjoyable players. You average them out with if they're fucking good or not, and then those are the guys I want to own. Like, okay, you know what? Enjoy your fucking 12 points from Todd Gurley, but hate yourself for doing it. So that's where I stand. I don't think Brian Hill is actually like that much better, but he's different.
Yeah, this Atlanta team feels destined to add some running back next year. I mean, they got Gurley on the cheap on a 1-year deal. Atlanta used to be this like sort of running back coveted location. There was a time where owning a Falcons running back was something to be, you know, held in high regard. But at this point, yeah, Todd Gurley doesn't look the same.
The pre-cutter days, man. The pre-cutter days.
Right. I just don't know that the answer is in this backfield. And like you said, yeah, they both have 7 targets on the season, which is literally nothing. That's Joe Mixon status, which we're probably going to get to him later. But there's less confusion about the Atlanta backfield and a lot more confusion about this Los Angeles Rams backfield. Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, you know, you've got Malcolm Brown in there. What's going on here? Is Darrell Henderson about to take over this backfield?
Yeah, I guess he is until he isn't. I think what he did was like quickly filter Malcolm Brown out. I think, man, Cam Akers is it sucks because these rookie backs like mojo, right? Just straight up mojo is like one of the most important things from when they get drafted up until the beginning of the season. And like even looking at a dude like DeAndre Swift, man, such high hopes for him. As soon as he started sitting out practice, he was out for like that 1 week, 2 weeks with the leg. You're like, this is problem. He needed everything to hit right in order for him to hit his ceiling. He sits out. They sign like if he doesn't sit out, they probably don't sign Adrian Peterson. If they don't sign Adrian Peterson, he probably has that role by like week 1 or 2. You know, these things need to happen. And Cam Akers has had as many unlucky breaks as you can probably have right now in the Rams backfield. And he was the starter in week 2, and he was getting all the touches on that first drive, and he looked good before he got hurt. Then Darrell Henderson came in and looked amazing this weekend. And I think for the time being, yeah, it's going to be the Henderson show. Malcolm Brown came onto the field like at the end of the second quarter. He was a nothing last game, and it was a Henderson show. And I expect it to be Akers and Henderson when Akers finally returns to the field. But they have a pretty light schedule right now. I don't think there's any reason to rush Akers back right now with Henderson playing the way he is. So I'm ecstatic to have Henderson for the rest of the year. In terms of dynasty, listen, Akers as a prospect, those numbers aren't going anywhere. He's still athletic. He's still got the size. He's still fast and can catch the ball and can run really well. But again, like the mojo is a real thing. And like that can factor into the season long, which factors into dynasty.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the whole dynasty slant too, because I think Akers obviously is still the back you want to roster long term. But Henderson, man, coming off of 2 back-to-back top 12 RB weeks here, and I kind of just go back to when he was a draft prospect and he was coming out and that offseason, like he really was immediately tabbed as just next up, and then obviously that quickly went away. It's crazy just to look back on how high many of us are in some of these backs and how quickly they fall and then fall to the point of just being completely forgotten about. In Henderson's case, now all of a sudden, I think he's got a legit shot to kind of ride this thing out. I mean, even if Akers does come back, healthy or very close to healthy and knowing how exciting he was as a prospect and kind of where he was tabbed, where many of us were tabbing him in this offense this year, man, if Henderson keeps running like he has these past 2 weeks, I mean, it's going to be hard to really, find a way to siphon carries or targets away from him. So I don't know, Nate, maybe it's just me being a little bit higher on Henderson last offseason, getting swept up in all that. I don't know. Do you lean one way or the other here, Nato?
I think Cam Akers is probably the back to own in the long run. But when you look at Henderson, man, and I'm glad you brought up the sort of draft process a year prior, because he was considered the 4th or 5th, 5th best back in this class after sort of the Jacobs, Sanders, Montgomery. And then right in that group, you started to look at this next group of guys, and Henderson was right in that conversation, especially going to a backfield that we felt like didn't have a ton of challenges in the future. And this is a Rams team that's 2-1. I mean, I think they legitimately believe they have a shot at competing, even though the Seahawks are just going to smash them. But they legitimately believe that they have a shot. And I think they want to lean on that running back that understands the system as they're being competitive. And again, going back to this, Henderson was one of the sort of sought-after backs. And one of the things we loved about him was that burst, right? And you're seeing it on the field now. Chunk yardage. I mean, he had far less carries the week prior. 12 carries went 121 total yards. I mean, that was a big game. 20 carries last game. But yeah, he's been incredibly productive in this offense. They've got weapons on the outside. But Cam Akers, to me, is definitely a hold. I wouldn't be afraid. And to Nick's point, it's exactly right. Sort of that machismo or whatever. When you show up originally in the league as a rookie, I mean, we're seeing Dobbins is kind of playing this backwards role. We're seeing same thing with Swift. That was a great point about him. Same thing with Akers. So I think it's going to take time, but you just got to believe in the talent of these players. So I'm not worried about the situation. It's going to be what it's going to be this year. There's so many injuries. Just wait for any one of these guys to get hurt again, because it's almost a guarantee to happen at this point. Okay, yes, I agree with this next question. Nick Chubb is one of the top 3 best pure runners in the league, but as a huge Kareem Hunt throughout the offseason, he's not going away. He cannot be ignored. Nick, how do you value these two players?
Yeah, so like they're both just so incredible, and I would be happy to own both of them. I would happy to own either of them. I would be happy to start either of them on like a given week. They are both top 5 in like yak per attempt, both top 5 in elusiveness on PFF. And the Browns, like, they went into the offseason with a very, very, very clear plan, and it was to make this a run-first team. And they're running the ball at the second highest rate in the entire NFL. Like 53% of their plays have been run. And like, here's the thing with like offensive lines. A lot of people like to predict and project like lines improving and getting worse and stuff. Typically when we see big swings in offensive lines going from like really bad to really good or vice versa, it's from big pieces being moved around, right? It's not just like, oh, these guys are going to progress. Oh, we got a good like offensive line coach. Sometimes it happens, but more often than not, like the Rams, right? With Andrew Whitworth, like that was a game-changing piece for them. We saw the Cleveland Browns make 2 big moves to their offensive line this offseason, and it's come to fruition. Like they're top 5 in run blocking and pass blocking, basically in every like advanced analytics website that you can go find, and it's worked so well. I think like what is going to be really telling is the next kind of 3 games, right? Like this is an offense where a lot of times we'll have like 2 wide receivers on the same team, and in the summer you'll kind of debate it. You'll be like, do I want this guy or this guy? And you're just like, I'll take either piece because it's a funnel target offense. This is just a funnel to their running backs, and I think it will be a little bit more game script dependent going forward. Because you look at the first 3 games, and it was Baltimore. They got absolutely wiped out. So it's more of a Kareem Hunt than a Nick Chubb game. Then the next 2 games they were playing against like Cincinnati and Washington. So that's more of a Nick Chubb game. And those are games they expect to win. But the next 3 games, I think their schedule is Dallas, Indy, and Pitt. So neither of those 3 games are games that you expect them to get wiped out in. Neither of them are games that you expect them to blow the other team out in. So we'll get a much clearer picture as to what we'll expect. And I think realistically with Nick Chubb, like as much as I love him, he's someone that I actually would ship off in both season long and dynasty right now, because I think you're going to have as many games like you had in week 1 as you are in week 2 and 3, but he's actually coming off the week 2 and 3 games back to back right now. So his value is like, oh, he's Nick Chubb, but they played Cincinnati and they played Washington. So love both guys, but like I would sell Chubb on the value right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the whole trade proposition, because that's kind of where I wanted to go with this as well. I am in one of my season long leagues. I do have Chubb, and I have a ton of Chubb across Dynasty as well. So seeing Kareem Hunt, just knowing how talented this backfield is, knowing how much Kareem Hunt eats into to what Chubb does or can do, just his ceiling, it kind of sucks from that standpoint. But I've been floating Chubb out there in these season long leagues. A couple weeks ago, decided to hold on to him after knowing this past week's matchup, and again he certainly smashed. So I think to Nick's point, if you have Chubb and you perhaps have a need at wide receiver, or if you can return back a Sanders and someone else, this is definitely the time to go ahead and offload and try to take advantage of that super productive week 3. And again, to Nick's point, the schedule does I think it's going to be interesting. These next few weeks are going to be interesting enough for this backfield. And I know last week Kareem Hunt, and there was talk about it this past offseason, we're certainly seeing it play out, where Kareem Hunt is splitting out wide in the slot, whatever, being used more as that kind of pure receiver. So a very interesting way the Browns are approaching this. Again, it's bittersweet because of how talented Chubb is, how talented
you just know those like 8-point games are coming though. For sure. Like next week and then in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. It's going to be a roller coaster, and it's going to be super frustrating because we know Chubb can carry the load. We know Chubb can do whatever's going to be asked of him, whatever's going to be asked of Kareem Hunt. Chubb can do all that. But again, I mean, this backfield, man, is like so incredibly talented. It just doesn't make sense. I know, Nate, you're riding high, man, after all the Kareem Hunt propaganda this past offseason.
I mean, come on. I certainly was looking at Kareem Hunt in this. We all knew Kareem Hunt was good. Like, that was never a question. The question was, what is the volume going to be like? And we saw Kareem Hunt come back from suspension last year and phase Nick Chubb out of this offense in a lot of ways. And it's not so dissimilar as to what we're seeing right now when you look at the target share per game. Kareem Hunt's averaging 3.7 basically. Nick Chubb's averaging 1 target a game. We've talked about this in the past. When you look over the last 2 or 3 seasons, the top 10 fantasy finishers at the running back position, in the last 2 years, only 2 have finished with less than 60 targets. So Nick Chubb is going to need a boatload of touchdowns. Now, we know he's going to get the rushing volume. He has been getting it. But when you look at these two guys, Nick talked about this. They're both, top 5 in yards created. Currently, Nick Chubb is averaging 18 touches a game. Most people go, well, what's Kareem Hunt averaging? I don't know. He feels like he's on the field a lot. He's averaging nearly 16 touches a game. And some of those are through the air, and that's more valuable as Scott Barrett's talked about. I think a target's worth 2.75 times more than a rushing attempt. So Kareem Hunt's value is going to stay high, and he's more useful on the field at times than Nick Chubb is. And I totally agree on the sell factor. I know we love Nick Chubb, but he's in one of the craziest committee backfields we've seen in forever. I mean, when your fucking backup is Kareem Hunt, who would be legitimately the starter on any team in the league, short of Kareem Hunt getting traded, I think there is a concern for Nick Chubb at multiple points through the rest of this year. And I made a bet with Matt Kelly earlier in the year. We'll see if it comes true. I bet him that Kareem Hunt would finish with more total points by the end of the year, and I still don't think it's crazy. Nick, is that crazy?
Then Nick Chubb?
Yeah.
Yeah, he better giving you some fucking juice on that.
I don't know if he did. You know how the show goes. He doesn't give me any odds. I get no
straight up. I mean, yeah, that's kind of fucking lifeless of Kelly if he made you make that bet straight up. But I respect the balls on that, and I think is it PPR standings?
Yep. Of course.
Okay. I mean, listen, like straight up, if he's averaging 16 touches, Chubb's at like 18 or whatever, it's very, very doable. And Kareem Hunt, this is gonna be one of those seasons where like every week people are like, this is when, Kareem Hunt's efficiency is too high. It's got to regress. And then we look back and we're just like, no, he's just one of the best running backs in the NFL, and his efficiency is going to be there throughout the entire season. So no, I mean, Nick Chubb's rushing touchdowns are going to start coming down because they're not going to have that many opportunities against real rushing defenses. So I don't think it's crazy. I think that's a fucking fantastic call by you.
Thanks, man. I decided, Nate, you're doing pretty good. Things are going good in your life. Why don't you go ahead and set your nuts on the table and take an even bet? And I did, and I feel pretty good about that.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Dwayne Haskins. Not a big fan. Did a bunch of patron leagues this summer. I punted quarterback, so naturally ended up with Haskins everywhere. He's my second quarterback.
Too much Haskins.
Second quarterback in Superflex. Very fucked up situation to be in. So he's not good, right? And what does that mean for Terry McLaurin? Are you still buying up Terry McLaurin? What are your thoughts on him going forward?
So, I mean, listen, I'm ready for Alex Smith, man. I really am. He's the hero that we need, but like none of us deserve it. Like we shouldn't get Alex Smith, but I really hope we do see it. For Terry, I'm holding Terry if I have him, because I think we've seen his floor in 2 of the first 3 weeks. It's 4 for 60. It's 4 for 83, I think, this weekend. And then in between that, he's sandwiched with a 7 for $125 and a touchdown. And on the days where Dwayne Haskins is inaccurate for him, so I guess accurate in a sense, like Terry McLaurin will pop off there. So I think like more often than not, you'll probably get his floor, but his floor is fine. His floor is like a legit low wide receiver too, and his ceiling games, like right now, like talent-wise, man, there are not, outside of like the real elite dudes on the outside, there are not a lot of guys that you can really one-for-one put up above Terry McLaurin. I think just being the focal point of that offense in the passing game is enough of a floor that I'm not looking to ship him, man. I'll hold on to it and ride for smoother water.
Yeah, pulling up player profile, McLaurin's page here, dude. Number 4 in snap share, number 1 in route participation, number 11 in targets. So to Nick's point, certainly the focal points, certainly getting the looks, the volume. The volume for us obviously remains king. Man, it's I don't think you can really ship him and sell him for much. But man, Haskins is just so bad, and I really had. I don't want to say very high hopes, but I was certainly optimistic with Haskins coming out. I know things haven't broken right in Washington around him. He hasn't made things better himself. I don't think he's progressed. It's early yet. It's only been three games in the season, but he certainly hasn't shown very many signs of life. So it's a terrible situation in that regard. So Nate, I don't think you can get anything from McLaurin right now. I think holding him is the prudent move. But man, I don't know what's next for Washington. I guess they're targeting a quarterback early next year, perhaps.
That has to be the case. I mean, listen, Terry McLaurin is in a pretty awful situation. We can all agree. He is the guy there as well. He was great last year, currently averaging 16 fantasy points per game, faced Darius Slay, faced Patrick Peterson with Dwayne Haskins at quarterback. He's currently number 1 after the catch, which is insane because the ball is inaccurately being thrown his way. But okay, Nick, I want to ask you a question because you brought up the fact that that there was few wide receivers that you would take over McLaurin. Is that what you said earlier? Is that correct?
No, it was more so like on a talent level.
Okay.
I'm saying like Terry, if you take out, obviously I'm not about to compare him to like DeAndre Hopkins and those types of guys, but in the next tier of guys, just straight up, you put him in an offense similar to the same dudes. My comp for Terry McLaurin is like Robert Woods with 4.35 speed.
Love it. Let me ask you this then. Let me put you on the spot. I'm going to give you a contrived dichotomy. I'm going to give you another player. You tell me if you prefer Terry McLaurin to them, just based on players that are generally being valued in the same location.
In Dynasty.
So, okay. Terry McLaurin or Michael Gallup?
McLaurin.
Okay. Terry McLaurin or DJ Chark?
McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin or Cooper Kupp?
This
year's a sticking point. I'm actually surprised by this one.
Yeah, the other one would be tougher for me. The
only
Chark
because
McLaurin
he just got that extension. The Chark McLaurin thing was really close for me in the preseason, but like Chark's got me a little nervous, man. Right now, I don't like what we're seeing in the beginning of the season. Even when he was a little bit healthy, wasn't getting like the real targets that we were expecting from Gardner. But Terry, Cooper Kupp, like if I'm on the clock, what I'm doing is I'm taking Terry there.
Okay, last one. Deontay Johnson or Terry McLaurin?
Oh, that's so close. I was just redoing my rankings a little earlier today, and they're close. I will take Terry there as well.
Wow, just a clean sweep. One last one here. Terry McLaurin or Tyler Lockett?
Fuck that.
Wow.
Listen, we're
okay. Okay, you go.
I'm stressed. I'm stressed out. I didn't even get asked the question.
I'm sticking with my man. Terry.
Wow, okay. 5 for 5,
wow.
bro.
And Terry McLaurin, by the way, is 25 years old for those of you listening at home. I just wanted to say this too about Tyler Lockett. I just did this big show. I was talking about Tyler Lockett's just criminal, like undervalue history. And I basically said that he's a top 15 wide receiver who's constantly being valued outside the top 20. And I basically said on air, I said, listen, if you compare any of these other guys to him, then you necessarily consider him a top 20 or higher wide receiver. And I brought up Terry McLaurin because I think that Terry McLaurin is probably right there on the backside of 20 in terms of dynasty wide receivers. Now, based on your response, you probably have him closer to 15 overall. So if you were doing your rankings, is that about where you have him?
Yeah, I have Terry. I want to say Terry at like probably 16 or 17-ish in that range. And Tyler Lockett is just a dude that, man, I was going to wait till we talked about DK Metcalf for this, but like the same way we loved Clyde Edwards-Helaire and just like we want to own the Kansas City Chiefs running back because that position in fantasy is just so valuable. Is there a more valuable thing than just being attached to Russell Wilson right now? Like, no, right?
No. There's nothing.
Dude, what Skybox Shoddy is dialed up, man. I'm just so. I mean, again, I guess this is a case where the timeline has just worked out perfectly. And
call him Skybox Shoddy.
Skybox Shoddy. Is that?
I haven't even heard that yet.
You haven't heard that,
No,
Nate? You're you're
inundated
with Seahawks Twitter, man. Skybox Shoddy. It's a whole thing. Shout out Zach Whitman. I'm sure that was him, dude. Zach Whitman was fucking on ESPN, talking about let Russ cook. Just unreal. He had Josh Gordon tweet at him too today. Dude is just riding an incredible 3 or 4 day high. Dude, it's one of those things where we as football fans, as fantasy football fans, it's been a joke, right? You gotta let Russ cook, but you gotta just dial up these, just unleash Russie. And it looks like it's finally happened through 3 weeks, man. So Nate, it hasn't even hit its stride yet.
That's what I'm saying. The whole let Russ cook thing. I know Zach went on ESPN and explained it, but here's what I'm confused by. They're still not letting him cook. He's hardly averaging more than he's ever averaged in his career. And Russell Wilson, he's only finished in the top 10 in pass attempts once, and they're currently ranked number 20 in the NFL in pass attempts. Yes, Nick.
I knew that point was going to come up because that was the same thing I said after week 1. Everyone's like, oh my God, they let Russ cook. I was like, he threw the ball 33 times. What the fuck are you talking about? But the difference this year is now in the rate of passes, their plays as a percentage of their plays, much higher in the passing game. So their offense overall is so much more efficient rather than wasting 2 plays on a run, then letting him pass the ball. It's just pass off the rip. And he's scoring at such a high fucking rate that they don't get a lot of plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Russell Wilson is the god. We've been talking about this forever. It's just, to me, it's crazy because we were seeing Chris Carson targeted heavily. I mean, he was going to go 50 plus targets, but the fucking run game is good with Carson. Carlos Hyde spells him, but now we don't have Carson. So we'll see what happens with a lesser threat out of the backfield. I hope everybody was stashing Rashad Penny. He is coming back. We've been talking about this. Also, I think they extend Chris Carson, but you should add Rashad Penny. He will be back this year. He looked great in his 2 starts last year towards the end of the year. Nonetheless, I don't know what to add to Russell Wilson's thing. I agree with your point that the rate has changed, and Russell Wilson's just being more lethal. They're just letting him air it out, which is nice to see, and they should have all along, but I think we all agree, at the point in time that you made Russell Wilson the highest paid quarterback in the NFL when that was the case, they should have been letting him air it out nearly 40 times back then because the efficiency of Russell Wilson throwing the ball is so much greater than anybody else. It's better. It's a better bet than running. And now DK Metcalf is doing his thing, which we will get to. So you guys got me on a tangent. This is not
before we press forward, going back to the 5 players here, Nate. Just judging off your reactions, you would take Lockett over McLaurin. You would take Shark over McLaurin. You would take Deontay Johnson over McLaurin, and Gallup probably leaning McLaurin. And I forgot the 5th one.
The 5th one was Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. Cooper Kupp. So you would probably take McLaurin over Cooper Kupp.
Okay, here's where I'm at. I would go McLaurin over Kupp. I know that sounds crazy. I realize he got an extension, but McLaurin's so good. You're betting on his situation changing, which is a fucked up way to play the game. I realize it's a bad way to play the game. I like McLaurin.
But he's not bad. He's not bad. Now, if he was putting up 4 for 35 games, I'd be like, fuck, his floor is terrible, but he's not.
Yeah, he's really good. And I agree with your take on Chark. And Chark is very lucky that Shenault didn't tear the fucking scene apart last game. That could have been an insane turning point in this offense going forward if we saw Shenault just absolutely shred the field.
So you think that could have been the straight up the Wally Pitt moment
death
right
knell
there,
right there. That could have been it. I think we all felt like it, right, when Chark wasn't playing.
Well, it was If you were gonna play Shenault in season long or DFS for those that dabble, last week was the one where the stars for sure aligned and it didn't quite come through, unfortunately. Yeah. But that I guess that could have gotten really ugly for Shark really quick.
It felt fucking teed up. I'm gonna be honest with you. I bought the Shark card online. I've been buying cards. I talk about this a lot now, but I've been.
Oh, you're in the sports card game?
Yeah. Do you collect cards? Are you a card collector?
Nah. So I did when I was younger. I have a enormous collection of baseball cards, and I listen to Gary Vee almost daily, probably, and he's been chirping about it for 3 years now. I wish, like, I know I should. I wish I had time and energy. I remember I was a fiend when I was younger. I was buying like the tops of the Beckett books and looking up values. Like, I wasn't even selling my cards, but I'd be like, oh shit, this went up like 42 cents today. Like, I'm rich now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I wish I still had that mentality, because I'd be fucking absolutely dominating on the market. But no, I'm not.
Dude, Nick, here's the thing though, man. So I grew up the same way. My dad, we used to endlessly get that guy to buy us packs so we could rip packs. You know, you'd go, because you know how it goes, man. You open a pack of cards, you're like, shit, nobody. Dad, can I have another? You know, and he would buy you a pack of cards. Yep. You would fucking fly through a pack in no time. I've gotten back into it recently after, same thing as you, dude. I got a closet full of fucking cards that I haven't looked at in 25 years. But I found myself getting back into it, and I've got some patrons that I've talked to on the side that are very into card collecting. And so I've been buying up cards here and there, just trying to spend a little bit of money. Like, I bought this DJ Moore. It's called an RPA, so it's a rookie patch auto. It's like a thicker than normal card. It's got the player's jersey in it, and it's got an autograph that's authenticated by Panini. And you can buy these things. And I bought a really nice one for like $25. And it's, you take sort of that dynasty knowledge and sort of your...
Dude, I was going to say, yeah.
Dude.
Like, dynasty players will be real good at flipping cards,
100%. And the card market, similar to Ryan kind of earlier talking about like the value of running backs, how there's such a variance. The card market flies. Like, I was buying some of these NBA players that were about to go into the bubble. Their cards shot up while they were in the bubble. Then they got knocked out of the bubble. Their card went back down. So there's just this wild variance, like almost game to game, which is...
NBA's crazy. NBA's crazy because... the cards themselves, like, NBA is obviously a lot less popular overall than the NFL, in America at least, but you see the players' faces, you know? So, like, people get attached to NBA players way more than they get attached to NFL. So, like, the variance in those guys, like, they could do something on, like, TikTok that will make them fucking go through the roof because everybody knows them and stuff. So it's a funny game, man. If you're on top of pop culture and if you're on top of, especially, like, understanding dynasty fantasy football, there's definitely some shit to be had there in cards.
It's crazy, right, man? I think, and cards are so fun. And what I do, I've been in some auctions, and I like to fucking wait. I just camp out on it. I don't make a bid. I just watch it for days. And then when it gets right to the end, about 11 seconds, I just raise it $1 because eBay doesn't do this thing where, like, in auction leagues online, if there's like 5 seconds left and you put in your auction, it bumps it back up to like 15 seconds. You know what I mean? It always gives it a chance to never go to zero, but not on eBay. It goes to fucking zero. Yeah. So as long as your computer doesn't lag, you can buy that shit at like 4 seconds and just guarantee the win if you're willing to do it. So I've been just trying to win cards like on the last second. So it's a really embarrassing like addiction that it started. But my Dynasty fandom.
I think maybe in the off season when I have a little bit more time and we're not so like the in season grind is just out of control. Like it's so hard to keep on top of things outside of your life.
Sure.
But maybe like January, that'll be one of my passion projects that I do for a few months.
Should do it, man. I just neglect my whole fucking family, man. I'm just
all the time.
Screens.
Dude, same. Bro.
Exactly. So all right, Nick, let's move on with this thing here. So Ryan, beautiful question here. Talking about this Tampa Bay offense, talking about Chris Godwin being injured. What do we think about this Tampa Bay offense? I know we talked about Leonard Fournette right off the bat because you're a prick. So here we are now. We're looking at this question. What do you think about this offense as a whole?
I think they're fine, to be honest. I think like people were like, if they're not 6-0 by the time the season starts, they're not the greatest team of all time. And like we had to give them a little bit of time to mesh. I think Brady's been fine coming off a 3-touchdown game. He's rated pretty high in a lot of statistics. He's got like a top 5 passing grade per PFF behind Russ, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, guys like that. Number one in yours truly on. I just think for this team, there's been a lot of moving parts, right? Like coming into the season, Evans had the hamstring injury that hampered him. Leonard Fournette gets signed a week before. Now Chris Godwin's basically like dead, and we don't know what's going on right now. So there's just been so much craziness that's happening. And I don't know, like, when we're going to get to the point where we can say, like, okay, now they're at full strength. But if they can, here's the thing, like, they're 2-1. They play the Chargers and the Bears over the next 2 games, right? They can easily come away with 2 wins there, be 4-1, and have a great showdown against the Packers in Week 6, and we'll see what they're really made of at that point. Like, if this team can get through all this adversity right now with, like, a solid record, 5-3 over the first half of the season, they're going to be a problem over the second half.
So I admittedly I threw this question on the show sheet because I had been going back and forth with Mr. Late Round quarterback JJ Zacharyson. We've been talking about a bunch of different players, but I recently was offered Mike Evans for I forget what the trade was, but I've gotten a couple Mike Evans offers for a couple of my players this early this season already, and I was bullshitting back and forth with JJ. And JJ's response, he kind of left me hanging. He was like, listen, Evans, we know Evans is good, and he looks likely to be kind of the last man standing in the sense that, as Nick said, Godwin's banged up, Gronk's a non-factor, O.J. Howard's all over the map, the backfield is more or less a mess. So Evans looks like the guy in Tampa Bay, and Brady is kind of developing that report. But JJ kind of left me hanging and said, listen, I don't really think this Buccaneers offense is that good or going to be that good or maybe, to Nick's point, kind of hit those expectations. So he kind of had me shook with that. So I immediately kind of backed up. I was like, I really had to kind of reevaluate and kind of think this through myself. That's why I wanted to get your guys' take. So Nick, you seem to be a bit more optimistic, maybe.
I'm optimistic about the team overall.
Okay.
I don't know if we're going to see firepower out of the offense. I do think that this team is going to be like a very real playoff contender, though, by season's end.
And I think to your point, there was probably a bunch of, the offseason, we're so hungry for anything content related. So you see a cool fucking Brady, Gronk, Evans graphic and your pants immediately come off and everyone's excited and all that shit. But I think everyone kind of jumped the shark out a little bit ahead of themselves. And Brady, I think, has been okay. I don't think, again, he's going to hit wherever that bar was, prematurely set. Nate, are you, again, your Leonard Fournette fandom aside, do you have a strong take on, I guess, Evans in particular, or this Buccaneers offense as a whole moving forward, just for this season redraft purposes?
Man, I love Mike Evans. I've always liked Mike Evans, and that guy is just, it's weird. He's kind of been shit on in some circles, and he's been great his whole career. Now, admittedly, he's had a lot of volume his whole career, and I did have questions when Tom Brady was coming to Tampa Bay. I was like, well, is he going to be able to sort of mesh with what this offense wants to do? Is he going to be good for Mike Evans? And you look back at 2019, and Tom Brady was in the top 10 in pass attempt distance overall. And then, not so shockingly, he's currently number 7 overall in air yards. So Tom Brady is still slinging it down the field. Thus far this year, he's got 2 top 12 finishes. So he's been startable as a quarterback, despite the fact that he was left for dead by a lot of people. I mean, the smart people were still picking him up because it was hard to deny Tom Brady when you're looking at Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard, Rob Gronkowski. By the way, Gronkowski woke the fuck up, which was surprising. I didn't think that was going to happen because I also thought he was left for dead. But
can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just on the Gronk subject. Yeah. Did you guys see that video of him talking about going to? It was like some amusement park or something. Someone like made a video of Gronk. It was in a press conference, and it's like if CTE were a person, and it was like a clip of Gronk through the thing.
Oh no!
And it's like the funniest shit. It's like a 10.
I haven't seen it. I'm upset that I haven't seen it.
Guys on Twitter DMs, and I'll throw it like down below in the description or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't stop watching it. He just looks like like more of a psycho than Gronk usually looks in some of these press conferences. Man, it's the funniest shit ever. But I'm glad he's kind of back. I guess he's probably back until he's not, right?
Yeah, and I think Gronk is like a perfect like a metaphor for this Buccaneers team. He was the guy that, oh my God, Gronk's out of retirement. He's linked back up with Brady. It's fucking wheels up. Top 5 tight end is locked in, and it's through 3 weeks anyways. It's been anything but. Again, I think it's just the offseason. We kind of find ourselves, building these narratives and telling ourselves these stories. And Gronk seemed he certainly looks like a mirage right now.
Okay, tell me this, Nick. We had a game the other night. The Chiefs and the Ravens. Is there anything that we learned at all in this game? I mean, is there anything to take away from this game whatsoever?
Yeah. So that game was last night, and I guess we're filming this Wednesday, and we did like a live stream on YouTube for it. I had some of my friends come over to my apartment. We had like a little drinking game up, and one of the drinking games was like, drink every time a useless player scores a touchdown.
Oh boy.
And naturally we ended up pretty drunk by the end of the night.
I love that.
Like that.
Eric Fisher fucked you up.
In those games, like in the primetime games, there's always weird shit that happens like that. I think you have to expect it. People, the most fascinating thing about like Twitter and fantasy football Twitter especially is every time Lamar gets on primetime against a good defense, he has a lot of egregious throws. Like that happens way more often than we want to admit. He's an awesome quarterback, but he does that pretty routinely when we're all watching, and every time everyone gets re-shocked again. But like, he's fine. He's still Lamar Jackson. Like, that's what he does. Like, his receivers did him no help. I think between Andrews and Hollywood, they were credited with 5 drops together. So his stat line would be a lot better. They'd had a lot more time of possession if they didn't drop those things. So the KC defensive line looked fucking awesome, by the way, too. Like, the Ravens up front could not handle them. And when they started off against like haymaker after haymaker in terms of their schedule. When they start going up against like lighter fronts, man, I don't even know what they're going to have to do on offense for KC, because the defense is going to chew up opposing offenses. So I think that was another problem for Lamar. Maybe their O-line is just not, losing Yanda, losing some of the pieces. Like, maybe they're not as good up front as they were, but like, again, this outcome really wasn't surprising, and I'm so shocked that it keeps re-surprising people.
Yeah, I guess my 3 big takeaways were that definitely the Chiefs defense looked fucking legit. And we're not going to sit here and talk about the fucking defense, but I mean, just knowing that they have Mahomes on the other side of the ball, like, the Chiefs look ready to just run again. Mark Andrews, like Nick said, dude, you dropped a touchdown. Like, his box score and the game itself would have been completely different if he just could hold on to a couple balls, let alone a touchdown ball. The other one, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here. J.K. Dobbins has to be more involved. Like, the dude, all he does is have like these explosive, like a play or two a game, and then he's just kind of forgotten about for a quarter or 2 or 3. Like, I don't know if the Ravens they weren't expecting him to we heard this offseason about how involved he's going to be and how excited they were for him. And again, I know it's early, it's only three games in, but I mean, like, it just feels like it makes no sense that he's not on the field more and contributing more, because I think he can do so much for this offense. Nate, am I like unnaturally high on J.K. Dobbins, or is that a proper take?
No, I think that after we went through all of our dynasty drafts, I know at least me personally, I don't know where Nick was on him or you, Ryan, but Dobbins was number 3 to me. I had Clyde Edwards at number 1, Jonathan Taylor at number 2. You can flip-flop those either way you want. Get off my back already. And then
we don't have to do that argument today. Don't worry.
Please don't. Please don't.
God, I just don't have the energy. And then J.K. Dobbins for me was number 3, going to Baltimore. The running back historically in the Baltimore offense has been such an exceptional contributor. And we looked at Dobbins' skill set and we thought, hey, he's going to be great in this offense. Some people knocked his pass catching prowess, and we've seen him thus far as he's been in the league for a couple games here, and he's actually looked pretty good in that role. But the touches have been super low. And again, I think this is a case where this is an offense. The run game pretty much funnels through Lamar Jackson. He's averaging almost 11 per game. The next closest back is Mark Ingram. He's averaging 8.5. So I think they want to put their veteran players in front. That's why we're seeing more Gus Edwards, who's been decent, and Mark Ingram in the front.
We gonna act like Gus wasn't the best running back on the field last night?
Dude,
I've
agree. Seen so much fucking Gus propaganda today. I can't take it. Let Dobbins cook, boys. Let him cook.
Let him cook at the expense of Ingram, though. Ingram looks like Todd Gurley fucking chopped his leg off.
Yeah, Ingram looks like a non-factor for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the deal when you look at these offenses. And Dobbins' time is going to come. I mean, different than Cam Akers. And Akers got hurt. There hasn't been as much competition. We know that Gus Edwards is not competition, who also was a free agent at the end of this year. We know that Mark Ingram is getting older, and he's going to get passed by J.K. Dobbins at some point. So I'm not afraid of Dobbins' situation whatsoever. And on the point of Lamar Jackson has been so fucking good at the NFL level. It's ridiculous. So even if there's some inaccuracy in his pass game, which is something that people thought he would never fix coming out of college. I mean, there were a couple guys who were admittedly on him. You look at his rookie year, not the highest completion percentage of all time. He's turned into such a dynamic threat at quarterback. I mean, it's just no question. He's always going to be in that top 3 quarterback conversation. Patrick Mahomes did kind of what we expected him to do. I mean, he can carve anybody up at any moment. But what was crazy was watching them just dial it the fuck up, because in the broadcast, I forgot who it was that said it. Was it Riddick? Maybe he was talking about how they don't care down in distance. They just want another shot at bombing it down the field, bro. Right?
That makes so much sense when you if you've never heard that and then you think about they were honestly, like, their play calling was so disrespectful last night. Like they were just running fucking trick plays and like doing really crazy things, and it just works. Like, It's so much fun to watch them make things happen on offense. But like back to Dobbins, man, if we all the entire thing this offseason, you could have had Dobbins at running back too. Your analysis would have been like, it's going to take him some time to get the role here. So again, I don't know why everybody's acting surprised that exactly what we thought was going to happen is happening. You know what I mean? Like, of course we want to see Dobbins with 20 touches a game, but like, it's not realistic. So temper your expectations for it. He's still a great running back and he's still in a great offensive situation, but that's just not their game plan right now.
So, and on the topic of Andy Reid, the play calling, the total disrespect, I mean, they were basically like heat checking. I mean, Nick, I don't know if you've ever been so hot in a basketball game that you just came down the court and just threw one up because you're like, fuck it, I'm so hot, it's probably going in. You just got to check. You know, it usually misses. But the point is that
I don't know if you were going to parlay that into like a basketball story of your own where you were just incredibly warm on the court.
Listen,
I was waiting for it.
No, there's not a lot of like.
I didn't know there was another way to play basketball. To be honest,
just to be
That's all I do.
Heater.
Right, yeah. My people don't stand out on the basketball court very well. So, but what about Mecole Hardman? I mean, we've been talking about the potential of a breakout. There was questions about whether it was going to happen with Sammy Watkins coming back for this year. Tyreek Hill's role, the obvious role of Travis Kelce, and then the addition of Clyde Edwards. But Mecole, man, he slings it down the field. He's down there making big plays, catches it for a touchdown in this game. Was that just kind of what you expected from him, that we're going to get that sort of variance every other week, every few weeks? Or do you think that there could be more here?
Nah, this changes nothing for me, to be honest. He was still fourth in snaps, still fourth behind Robinson, Watkins, and Hill, man. It just that was what I was a little bit nervous about in the summer, people projecting the upside, but we didn't hear anything during the summer that like, oh, he surpassed Watkins or he surpassed Robinson. And then we go out there in the first game and he's running as the 4. Second game, he's running as the 4. This game, he puts up a big touchdown on primetime TV. We get excited about it. You look at the real numbers behind the box score, still running as the 4, man. So until we see like factual evidence that he's no longer the wide receiver 4, there's just no way you can trust him.
Yeah, and it was obviously very easy to tell yourself a story that, Hardman was going to break out between the speed, the offense, and just, the draft position and knowing what he could do just with the speed alone. Very easy to fall in love, especially where he was going off the boards. But as Nick said, the reality is he hasn't managed to work himself back up that totem pole yet.
This is a situation where like preseason would have let us know exactly where we were at, right? Because this is where like snap counts in the preseason with the ones would have told us that he's a 30% snap guy. And then you have the actual, tangible evidence rather than just projecting him to overtake one of those guys as a starter. But that's what made this summer with COVID and not having training camp and preseason difficult for those tweaker, borderline, high upside kind of guys. We don't know what their role is going to be.
Yeah. And Nate, is this someone that is still, again, given the speed, given where he plays, is this someone that you're still looking to acquire in Dynasty? Someone that is at all on your radar? Is the asking price still too high?
It's tough, man. Kansas City just feels like we kind of know who they are and we know who this offense is. As long as Kelce is healthy, as long as Tyreek is healthy, what they're going to do with Clyde Edwards. I don't know. I just think that with Mecole, you're probably waiting on a bomb, right? I just don't know that he's going to be the possession receiver in this offense. It's clearly funneled through Travis Kelce forever. Robinson's been actually decent when given some opportunities, so it's really hard to say how they're going to use him in the offense. I'm not actively seeking him out that much anymore. I was kind of high on him when he was a second-round pick. He's got the speed. Felt like this 1-2 option with Tyreek Hill, but to Nick's point, I don't think that if we had seen a preseason, that's sort of what we would have gleaned as far as the information. So I'm a little lower on him at this point. I think with the Tyreek Hill injury, it may give him more of an opportunity for emergence, but I still think that if anything, you're a year away. Watkins has to go away. And even then, the question is, do they even rotate more to Mecole Hardman? I don't know. I don't think so. But here's what I'm not surprised by. I refuse to be surprised by this because the Breakout Finder was very high on this guy. Okay, the Breakout Finder was high on Shenault. Breakout Finder was high on Bryan Edwards. Breakout Finder was fucking high on T. Higgins. T. Higgins had a 51.3, which is an incredibly high score in the Breakout Finder. Breakout Finder app, look in all the stores. It's there. As well as he had a massive teammate score coming from the college that he came from. He has passed A.J. Green. That is absolutely my belief as well. It seems like that's Ryan's belief based on the question. Nick, T. Higgins. Are you high on T. Higgins? Is the future bright for T. Higgins? He was the first pick of the second round. The Bengals had all night to think about it. They came back. They took him. What's the future?
I'm admittedly not not high on T. Higgins.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
I don't really have a good take for it. He was just one of the dudes I watched. This was like a film part of me when I have to familiarize myself with the new incoming crop of rookies. What I'll do is I'll start listening to your guys' podcasts who are covering Dynasty year round and who have covered these guys for a while, and I'll hear the names and I won't be able to start really understanding them until I watch them play. So I started watching T. Higgins. I was kind of wildly unimpressed by what he's doing. I also don't think that he's above AJ Green right now. For this season, at least, he's definitely the future of that passing game. And I'm kind of going to combine a few questions here because they go together. I just sold T. Higgins in a Dynasty league. I also sold I sold T. Higgins. I guess he's like the number one goal line option there, right? Because I sold Joe Mixon as well, and I'm really happy to ship his ass off. So I sold Mixon, I sold Higgins, right, and I sold Terry McLaurin. So we had a mixed bag of guys that I sold there.
The McLaurin stuff must have cut you, man. You love McLaurin. Admittedly, right now, we know you love McLaurin.
It hurt deep until you hear what I got on the receiving side.
Okay, what do we got?
Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, and a third.
Okay. So anytime you get McCaffrey back, man.
There you go. That's all I needed to hear. Okay, T. Higgins, I'm willing. I also made the trade prior to this weekend, prior to him scoring the 2 tugs. So obviously this looks way worse now doing it. But I'm probably going to be on the wrong side of history when it comes to Higgins. We'll just put it that way because he looked very good on Sunday.
The knock, and Nate, feel free to pile on here. The knock on Higgins was there was questions about the athletic ability. There was the big buildup to the combine, and I believe he ended up. I don't remember if he actually got hurt or if he just ended up just opting out, which I guess not getting hurt and straight up opting out raises a lot more flags, maybe just to draft Twitter or maybe, to front offices in general. Certainly not the Bengals. He was the 201. So the Bengals liked him enough to give him an early day 2 look. And last week, man, nine targets. Again, it's early in the season. There's a lot of moving parts. And we can talk about it a little bit here if we want. I think it's further down the show sheet, but T. Higgins getting inserted. AJ Green may or may not be getting jumped here, but John Ross, a healthy scratch. It seems like there's certainly musical chairs going on. Joe Burrow, I think the future's bright. Maybe they want to get him linked up and a lot more comfortable and familiar with Higgins in these live game situations right now, and they're going to kind of, let both these guys out of the gates at the same time. So I think I might have been higher. Certainly, it sounds like a little bit higher on Higgins than Nick was. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here because I still am such an AJ Green fan, although I just don't think he is the same player given the injuries and given kind of what the Bengals have shown us through 3 weeks and what they want to do with perhaps other players. Nato, man, is this a situation where if Nick's selling Higgins, are you going to be on the other end looking to buy Higgins at this point?
Yeah, listen, man, I have to contractually, sell my soul to back the Breakout Finder. I have no choice. Okay, I admit that to the audience. I have no choice, but. T. Higgins, the pro day testing, the holdout at the combine, all these things kind of went against him. We've heard people talk about in the past that speed is somewhat overrated at the wide receiver position, which is true if you look at fantasy producers overall and you look at that overall speed. Oftentimes, a lot of these guys are not 4.4 guys that are finishing highly. But T. Higgins looks nuanced. He looked good on the field in this last game. He had a couple of catches that looked big time. So I think him and Joe Burrow with the rapport that's going to be built over time is going to be something that's certainly going to change people's opinions and sort of open their eyes. I mean, this was probably the first of many games where T. Higgins is going to erupt. This was his first game, second game, but 88.7% snap share, his highest snap share of the season. So I look forward to him playing well going forward. Again, the first pick on day 2 is meaningful. They could have traded the pick. They could have done anything else with the pick. They could have had a multitude of wide receivers. They went with Higgins. They had Burrow. I think the combination is going to be electric in the future. And Nick, I think in the future, you're not going to regret that trade. I love.
I think I'm fine getting C-Mac. I'm okay with it. But I think Higgins, the reason I didn't necessarily have a problem with him as a player, my comp for him, like the ceiling I saw for Higgins was more like Mike Williams-esque. And I'm just like, if I'm going to have a first round pick in a dynasty draft, like I'd rather take a guy that I, personally believe has a higher ceiling than that. So he fell to me. So I got him at like the 204, the 205, and I was obviously fine taking him there. But if I was at like the 111, I would have preferred a handful of other receivers there. I don't know if he's going to be like that true elite number one, and guys that aren't like top 15-ish wide receivers just don't really like move the needle in fantasy football.
So let me ask you a question then. Is your biggest reason for not really fully buying into T. Higgins his athleticism? I mean, if he was okay, so let me ask you this. Denzel Mims, T. Higgins, which of these two players do you prefer prior to coming into after they landed in their locations, which player?
I would have taken Mims straight up. If this was prior to like the summer injuries, I would have taken Mims.
Now, how much of that has to do with athleticism?
So going back to like me watching the film, like I remember our first Dynasty show I did in like March or April on my channel. One of the first things I said was like, Denzel Mims is going to be what everybody wants T. Higgins to be. They reminded me of each other, but Denzel Mims just, when I watched him, he was just like way more explosive, so much more, not just like looking at player profile athletics. Like on the field when I watched him, I was like, yo, this dude is like, wiry and he could move really well. His agility was great. And he was just moving like I didn't see T. Higgins move. And I'm just like, he has an extra gear to his game that I never felt that I got from T. Higgins.
Right. No, and I think that's fair, and I think that's probably a pretty fair comp. Between the two players in terms of size and skill set. But when Kelly had talked about going to the Senior Bowl and how Mims had truly stood out, and there's been a lot of players that have gone to the Senior Bowl, stood out there, and been a success in the future. And this is another one of those players that you just cannot give up on. I'm still really high on Mims, even though that offense is trash. Recently brought this up as well. Again, did a Patreon show, patreon.com/I'm outraged. Talked about Denzel Mims and the potential that when he does come back, he could certainly pace every other rookie wide receiver in targets from this point till the end of the season. And I don't think that's crazy because there is no other options playing for the Jets. So he's a guy that I would like to get my hands on in Dynasty because he hasn't had an opportunity to pop yet. So that's another name to monitor, but I love Christian McCaffrey over everything. Here's someone that everybody absolutely fucking hates, Nick. People hate Carson Wentz. Do you hate Carson Wentz?
Dude, this is such a tricky situation because it's really like when you watch him, you're just like, yo, what is happening in Philadelphia?
Not good, not good.
But we also, the way I'm looking at this is like, what's the common denominator here? Like we've seen Wentz be really good. And we've seen Wentz be bad. And when he's bad, like what's going on? Like the entire team is decimated. So before I give up on him, this is what I'm going to need to see things at full strength and him be bad. That's how we've seen enough good from him that I'm going to need to ensure myself and let myself know that he is in fact bad when he's surrounded by good parts again.
And I think a lot, in fairness to Wentz, who I think a lot of people, I know last season was there was a big MVP push for Wentz in the offseason. And this past offseason, a little bit less so, but still a lot of people very, very high on him, especially when the Eagles went out and landed someone like Jalen Reagor early on, who again, unfortunately is hurt. But I think in fairness to Wentz, you watch a lot of these games through 3 weeks now. Dude is just running for his life. The offensive line is obviously banged up. And I think, and again, I don't mean to keep jumping ahead here and parlaying these questions like this, but I think this benefits, someone like Miles Sanders greatly, who looks like he's just going to get up and running. Wentz is going to have to rely heavily on Miles Sanders and what he does as a pass catcher, as a runner. I think last week Miles Sanders had some pretty naughty, pass protections too. So just overall, what Miles Sanders brings to the table should hopefully offset some of Wentz's shortcomings or just, what the offensive line isn't able to do. And I guess the offensive line in turn could kind of work against Miles Sanders as well. So a lot to monitor there. And it just sucks because there was, going back to these rookies and the expectations for someone like Jalen Reagor, who unfortunately is banged up. Just Philadelphia's a mess, man. It's tough to really tether yourself to any one person that isn't probably Miles Sanders right now.
So, Nick, let me ask you this question. So Philly's 0-2 with a tie, right? And if this persists, the offensive line is what it is. The injuries to the outside, Goddard recently hurt, Rager's been hurt, Alshon Jeffrey, MIA. All these weapons are gone. If this team is 3-6, 3-5 at some point.
This is a Hurts question, isn't it?
This is a Hurts question. And if Carson Wentz is truly still what they believe is the guy, does Jalen Hurts step on the field and do they give him an opportunity? And if he plays well, despite the exact same conditions that Carson Wentz could not succeed under, what could that do in the future?
I can't imagine. I don't think Jalen Hurts steps on the field this year. I can't imagine that happening. Like Doug Peterson, very, very questionable decisions being made right now, but he also is right there and he's able to put context behind what's happening to Carson Wentz right now. I don't think you want to throw a rookie who's probably not ready to be in the NFL into that situation, who's going to be running for his life without weapons. Like that's how you ruin a young quarterback pretty quickly. And I feel like he's a better coach than that. So Wentz will probably continue to struggle given the fact that his line is completely. Another thing of like people being surprised. Like we look back at last year and we're like, yeah, like of course he struggled. Look at his weapons. Look at all the injuries that happened to. And it's worse this year. And now we're like, whoa, like he's really bad. But it's like we're going to react surprised again when when all this shit happens again. So my thing is I don't believe that if he does, it's because he's struggling really bad in the first half of the game. Maybe they just put Jalen Wentz in for the second half. And then I think the next week they'll roll Wentz back out as a starter again. But I see no way that straight up Jalen Hurts takes over the starting job for like the last 6 games of the season.
Listen, Ryan, I'm turning to you because that was more vanilla than I expected. Ryan, where's the spice? Is he going to step in and take this job?
Truth hurts, baby.
Yeah, Hurts. The spice for me, I had Hurts as quarterback 2 in Dynasty, above Herbert, I believe. So that's where my spice came from. I loved Hurts. Again, it's I fall in love. Rich Rebar, man, at night calls me up and just whispers all the sweet Konami code nothings in my ear. You know what I mean? So I obviously fell in love with Hurts, what he does on the ground, and just he's one of those guys that it doesn't really matter for fantasy football, but just those character guys, just those high character, all those intangibles, all that shit. Love all that stuff. Love Hurts. I think if things go off the rails here, this offensive line, puts Wentz in some sort of predicament where he does get banged up again. You can see Hurts for sure get inserted. Maybe sooner than a lot of us would have thought. I want to tie this back into. I brought up John Ross earlier. It feels like the Eagles flipping like a 4th or a 5th or a 6th for John Ross just makes sense, or someone. I want someone to make a trade for John Ross. Am I asking a lot here? I just feel like John Ross, and I'm going completely off the Wentz fucking wagon right now, but John Ross on his second team, boys, has to be a lot better than what we've seen right now in Cincinnati. And maybe I'm just a hopeless John Ross truther.
I think you might be. To this point in his
You don't like John Ross at all?
I like John Ross. Listen, I like John Ross a little bit coming into the league. Admittedly, his college profile was a little strange for me. Looking back at it and the hype that he was garnering, obviously great athlete, super fast. Fast guys haven't always translated to being a success at the NFL level. We've seen a lot of fast guys get drafted early in the NFL draft and not play well. The other thing about John Ross is the one game that I loved is when he shredded the living fuck out of Seattle, okay? That was the one game where he came in and he absolutely just...
Was that like last year, like week 2 or week 3 or something?
It was week 1.
Week 1.
7 for 158 and 2 touchdowns. So I was like, holy fuck, this guy's about to do it.
I was fucking boned up.
He's about to do it, and then he...
How about him in Seattle prior to them getting DK? That would have been a nice fucking pairing. Or even as like a slot receiver. That'd be nice
home
right now.
There's so many teams that make sense for him, man. A healthy scratch last week, that really kind of got me hot.
When you wrote that on the show sheet, I saw that John Ross, a healthy scratch. I wrote a response to it on the show sheet, and I was gonna say I wish this question was a healthy scratch off the show sheet. I was ready to fucking deliver that.
It bothered me, man. It bothered me.
Not about. I see that you're bothered about.
I'm upset by it.
I'm gonna go ahead and put the strike through it for you, Ryan. Actually, I don't know how to do it. It's somewhere over here. Done. So okay, listen. Let's move on. Let's go to a more dire situation. Fantasy owners, more specifically dynasty owners, don't know what to do. Okay, they drafted Joe Mixon in their rookie drafts. They were told they were getting a certified stud. Okay. They were told they were getting a certified stud. Now, by all accounts, Joe Mixon is very, very good, but the situation around him has not always been so good. This year, more upgraded weapons. Left tackle comes back, new quarterback, wide receiver weapons. Tell me this. Should we be afraid of owning Joe Mixon? You just sold him, right?
I couldn't wait to get him off my team, to be honest.
Wow.
Here's like people get so butthurt when you say to sell Mixon.
I'm butthurt right now. You sold him.
No one's telling you that he's a bad running back, but everyone jumped the gun on the Cincinnati offense as if they don't have a shit offensive line. Where did Gio's still there? And like they did this all last off. This was the point I made all summer, man. Like Mixon played in more games last year than he did the year prior and saw his target total go down by 10 because Gio took all of the 2-minute drills. He took all of the 4-minute drills. He's in, and those things add up at the end of the season. That's the difference between like a 37 catch running back and a 57 catch running back. And the difference between a low end RB1 and a higher. And like, listen, he's going to have his, 20 for 120 and a touchdown game eventually. And people are going to get excited about it. But like, how many times can we run this thing back right now? And the reason I sold Mixon is literally because you're still getting Joe Mixon value. Like I got fucking C-Mac for him. Yeah. Like that's why I'm like, yo, get him off now until people need 9 more weeks to realize that Gio is always going to be a thing in this offense.
And I will say, again, I am certainly on, and Nate and I have talked about Joe Mixon, what seems like every single show he comes up, and I certainly am very high on Joe Mixon, and I every week, after every Sunday game here, Evan Silva throws up a tweet where he has his little takeaways, and no matter what, these past 3 weeks, he's had a buy Joe Mixon tweet, which is just it's kept me hanging on.
It's terrible, man. People do it every year. It's like if you're too slow, Mixon's value is going to keep dropping to that like RB2 status, and that's that's like the big thing. I was so concerned after week 1. I was like, bro, this is what we're going to continue to fucking. If week rough. 1 he didn't come out and that wasn't part of the game plan where he was going to get like 6 receptions or some shit, it wasn't going to happen. And we're seeing it. We're through 3 weeks now. Do we need to see another 3 weeks to believe it? I just don't get it.
And I will say that, Gio taking pass game work, I really didn't think it would be to this extent this early in the season, given, again, as Nate said, what Mixon was billed to be. At the same time, we know that whole front office, that whole coaching staff, they gravitate towards Gio. My man grew the fucking stash for the games this year, man. He's super, super serious. What really did kind of have me and my fandom kind of taking a step back is when Gio, I think it was last week, got like the goal line look or looks over Joe Mixon. Like to me, that was like either Mixon's hobbled or they just don't trust him for whatever the reason. That to me is more, inexcusable, unexplainable than Gio getting the pass game look. So I don't know, Nate, maybe Nick is smart to be ahead of this thing, but my fandom just won't quite let me let go at this point.
I mean, Nick being ahead of this is not just ahead of it necessarily because he's saying the right thing and it's not substantiated. I mean, he's right. Like Cincinnati's offensive line fucking sucks. They've got a rookie at quarterback. AJ Green hasn't necessarily been 100%. There's been tight end questions. And so this backfield is necessarily struggling along with the rest of this team. And yeah, they're facing some of the tougher competition in the league. Joe Mixon just signed an extension. We thought that was great news. That was, for Dynasty owners, signing an extension is a great thing for these running backs to add value. The thing is, Cincinnati added no other running backs to this roster, and there's nobody of competition other than Gio on this depth chart, which is fucked up because Gio's really stealing a lot of work. And it is concerning. I've had a couple people talk to me about what should I do with Joe Mixon, thinking about trading him for a wide receiver. And I'm like, wait, don't fucking trade Joe Mixon for a wide receiver. I'm not doing that. If I'm moving Mixon, I'm going to do exactly what Nick did. Let me buy my way into another running back, whether it's Derrick Henry.
I was trying to trade him for a while. I was trying to trade him like pretty much all summer, but the right offer did not. Like, I'm not getting rid of him just for the sake of getting rid of him. I'm getting rid of him because you could still get Joe Mixon name value for Joe Mixon. So I was like, when the right offer comes, like I'm accepting it, right? The contract was like, it gave me hope. I was like, oh, okay, I own Mixon. Like maybe now they gave him the contract, they use him a little differently. Week 1 came and I'm like, nah, same fucking shit. Like he's out.
Yeah, if it's possible to flip him for something, and I don't even know because you look at a lot of these running backs, it would be hard to get him. Your trade, obviously, a really good trade to pull off. If somebody's low on Dobbins right now, Akers, obviously Derrick Henry, somebody that I would love to get on my roster if it was possible to make a deal. But Joe Mixon, there are better days ahead with Mixon, but the problem is you can't predict them. You don't know when they are. You don't know when Gio's going to get heavily involved in the passing game. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Mixon had 4 big catches in a row, and then they never went back to him again, but they targeted Gio Bernard 7 times consecutively by the end of the game. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? We know that Mixon is a capable pass catcher. Why is he not being used more? And we're just racking our fucking brains. So I guess Nick is right. Rather than go through the headache every week, if you can get a deal that's worth it, then move Mixon. But again, I'm not moving him if I'm not getting a running back of value in return. I don't know if Jerick McKinnon would be the running back that I would be seeking, but what about Jerick McKinnon and his projections moving forward this year in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, he's looked fantastic. He looked fantastic. I don't think the rib injury that he sustained was anything serious. I think he'll be able to suit up as early as next week. So he seems to have that like lead role pretty cemented. If it's just him and Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson took like only garbage time work. So if you're looking at the fantasy numbers, I'm not too concerned about that being a real committee. The problem is like Mostert is the real fucking deal when he's on the field. Like he is really, really, really good. And he wasn't a guy I was targeting at all this year. And one of the reasons were like when you target dudes who don't have a big sample size, you don't know if they could hold up over the rigors of an NFL season. And so while yes, he's looked great, like that's another problem with drafting guys like Mostert is we don't know if they can withstand it, and he didn't, but he will be back soon. Like I don't think the MCL sprain he's had is serious. I think Joe Mixon had one last year. He was back in about 2 weeks. So Mostert should be back. And if Mostert's on the field, he's the best running back on the field. And that's the way I'm looking at it. So I like McKinnon, and I like what he brings to the field, and he can absolutely be a usable piece as a flex play just because the Niners backfield is all they do is spurn out flex plays and running backs that you could use in your lineup. But I would, if you're going to ask me right now who I'd rather own rest of season, even if Mostert misses another week, it's Mostert.
Are you potentially suggesting teeing up, maybe if you own McKinnon in Dynasty, is this a good time to potentially sell high? Was there any, do you think there's going to be a market that develops for him off of just name value and knowing that he's a San Francisco running back?
McKinnon seems like an emotional piece. Like no matter how you have him on your team, like you either held on to him for years and you finally got some value from him. So if I have him, I'm probably going to hold and just see what comes of it. And maybe I'll have like a nice piece to throw into my lineup week in and week out. I'm not someone who really, I know people in Dynasty trade like all the time, and we were just talking about one of my trades, but I think like buy low, sell high, and et cetera, get thrown around like so often in Dynasty. Mm-hmm. I'm not always looking to move pieces just for the sake of this guy's value just went up a little bit. So McKinnon falls into the category where I'll hold on to him and hopefully he can make some good starts. I mean, if I'm not competing whatsoever, yeah, maybe I'll try to chip him off for like a mid-second or even like a late second if I need to a competitor. Yeah,
and again, the question for McKinnon, at least during his time in San Francisco after collecting the bag, has always just been health and his availability. So as long as he got that on his side, that is certainly a step in the right direction. But I do tend to agree that whenever that time is when Mostert is able to carry the load again, it just feels like that is who Shanahan likely has the most trust in. We've seen him be this explosive piece, and he was someone that wasn't on a fade list for me, but he was someone that I was happy to not really have much of in season long, and not someone I was actively drafting, which before he got banged up looked like a pretty big mistake. So he certainly is the real deal, and I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco, again, when he is healthy, they just revert right back to letting Mostert get all the work.
No, I agree. There's not much to add to that. I will say that I've speculated throughout the year here that Jerick McKinnon's going to end up behind Saquon Barkley in New York next year. Just mark my words. I'm just saying it early.
That's a good call.
That's my expectation right there. Especially with Dion Lewis, Devonta Freeman being gone, sort of the injury to Barkley, and putting a putting a really explosive player behind him to pair with Barkley's explosiveness. So just watch that happen. He's going to New York next year. So. All right, let's move on from this question. Let's move to an even more fantastic running back. Let's talk about Miles Sanders. And is he about to be the bell cow that everybody's been waiting for? Is it coming, Nick?
Yeah, it should have already happened. Like it like has happened, but it hasn't really happened yet. Right now, he's only played 2 games, but he's third in the NFL in opportunities per game. 26.5 opportunities per game. It's behind Derrick Henry and it's behind Josh Jacobs. End of list. Then it is Miles Sanders. So as far as I'm concerned, like he's done it. He just has like whatever the case may be, Wentz missing him on the 50-yard walk-in touchdown. He's everything you're looking for in a fantasy back. It just hasn't actually been put on paper yet. So yeah, like Miles Sanders, I think I was all in on him this summer. I actually just moved. I have Saquon in one of my dynasty leagues, and I was 2-0, and I'm like, I want to compete this year. So I moved Saquon for Debo and Miles Sanders.
Yeah,
so
I had to shoehorn
there.
Yeah, I had to shoehorn a Sanders question in there because I think, Nick, you and I were going back and forth early this offseason, and you might have been the only person that had him not even just higher than me, but just like notably higher than me, like several spots ahead of where I thought I had like an aggressive Sanders ranking. So I think like we talked about before, given the Wentz situation, the offensive line situation, what the situation of the pass catchers are in Philadelphia, this seems to be things are setting up very, very nicely for Miles Sanders, and he's someone that like Nate was saying, if I'm moving a big name running back, I want to get someone like Miles Sanders back, and then depending on who you're moving, and then some. Or I'd be very happy to get Miles Sanders back, kind of as a solo piece, someone that I'm aggressively targeting. I just think he's gonna fully insert himself, very, very soon, and certainly by the end of the season as that, true bell cow type running back.
If you could get Miles Sanders back in a trade, I mean, I've pretty much advocated against selling Saquon Barkley. There's just not really an equitable trade out there. I think people are just actively trying to screw you over on deals like, oh, well, I don't know if he's going to be the same player next year.
It didn't feel good. It definitely didn't feel good getting Saquon off the team, but I was like I play fantasy for fun. I'm not trying to just tank the rest of my season away, you know?
No, I respect that, and I think this is what Kelly and I talked about on the last podcast. There are people exactly with the same mindset as you, like, I know Saquon's elite, I know this is Dynasty, but I want to compete this year, so I'm willing to make a deal. And there's guys like me that I have Saquon. I'm like, fuck it. The whole ship's going down. I'm going down with it.
Yeah.
Tank the year, week 3. I don't care. But so I think that you need to test the waters in your leagues and see what you can get. But if you could get Miles Sanders plus exactly a high-end wide receiver or somebody with a lot of upside.
That's why, yeah. Like I was offered Miles for Barkley straight up first, and I was like, no. Like I understand what I have in Saquon. So you have to put like a very good deal on the table for me to part ways with Saquon, but that was more than enough for me to pull the trigger on.
Yeah, no, that's good. A lot of people are struggling right now. I see a lot of people that continuously bring this topic up, and you don't have to move on from guys, but to Nick's point, if you don't have the depth and you want to be competitive, sometimes you have to break that. You have to break that high-end piece and turn it into multiple pieces. Okay, Ryan, explain this question. To me. You read this one.
Are we talking about Benjamin Snell here, Nato?
Benjamin Snell question.
What? So again, I've brought up a couple of topics that I've seen floating on the timeline recently, and there's been a lot of, we had week 1 where James Conner, I believe, got dinged up or relegated, whatever it was, and Benny Snell had a pretty decent outing, and there was a lot of hullabaloo, boys. Is Benny Snell gonna jump James Conner? Is James Conner not long for Pittsburgh? And that obviously very quickly died down. I think last week Snell looked like the 3rd best back on the team, and up to this point he was someone that I was talking to Nate, I think maybe offline, if I had to delete some tweets, I would have to find all my Benjamin Snell tweets because I absolutely roasted Benjamin Snell. He's a player that I had no faith in coming out, and super, super sharp guys like Sean Siegel have been all over Benjamin Snell through his entirety in the league. So I was like, man, I'm probably on the wrong side of this thing. But I say all that to say, through week 3, he just looks bad. He just looks like Benjamin Snell has always looked. Nick, I want to know, am I in the clear? Can I continue to get these tweets up? Can I continue the Benjamin Snell slander as you would continue Leonard Fournette slander?
Listen, the way I'm looking at this is like, I don't want to talk about the Steelers' backfield unless we're talking about Anthony McFarland.
Yes.
That's really all I'm concerned. This guy's on a Hall of Fame.
NATO's guy.
7.0 yards per carry. Just end the career there. Put him in the Hall of Fame.
Bring him to Canton.
Huge first game. No, I was happy. I was really happy to see him on the field after getting the healthy scratch as well the first week or two or whatever. But Benny Snell looked like the better back over James Conner in week 1. And then, like, shit just got so messy there between the reports of, was it an ankle injury? Did he get benched? Is he going to be playing next week? And for a second, Benny Snell was never a guy on my radar. Like, I was never drafting him in rookie drafts. But then this summer came around, and you're right. Like, I heard Matt Kelly on his podcast repeating it over towards the end of the summer about, like, Sean Siegel saying it. I started drafting a little bit of Benny Snell in best ball leagues, and he started getting on my radar a little bit. And then I saw week 1 happen, and I was like, oh, Benny Snell, like, might actually be a thing this year. And then they just gave it back to James Conner. So it seems to me that, like, even if they think James Conner is not the best back in their backfield, they trust him the most, I guess. So he's proven the last 2 weeks that he is the guy until an injury physically forces him off the field. So I don't know if I want to pull the trigger on the Benny Snell tweets, because there's a good chance James Conner ends up on the sidelines again at some point this season. But
it's not good news for me.
Yeah, but barring an injury, I mean, Benny Snell is probably back to wherever the snails come from.
I'm glad you brought up Anthony McFarland. I'm glad you did, because this was a guy we brought up a few weeks ago when Benny Snell had that good game, and we talked about, hey, this is good news because there's a lot of people that still believe that James Conner's the guy. So you've got this sort of divisiveness between these two groups that can't tell which guy's the guy, but nobody's talking about Anthony McFarland. That was your chance to go after him. Now he's played on the field, exactly to your point, played well, and it's like, shit, what's the future look like now? Because we can almost guarantee James Conner gets hurt again. I mean, that is with almost a guarantee. He will get hurt once again. It's coming. And if Benny Snell doesn't look good, given the opportunity to be the starter at that point, McFarland could run away with a significant workload up until the point that we get Conner back. What about Josh? What about Josh Allen? What about he looks amazing right now. I have admittedly taken lots of craps on him since coming into the league. Yeah. Thought it wasn't going to happen. Talk to me about Josh Allen. Is this for real?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you a take that's different from anyone in the league right now about how impressive this dude's been. I saw a tweet somewhere that over the last 14 games, 33 total touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Like those are insane numbers. And the bigger takeaway here, I think, is that nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to projecting quarterbacks, both
it's hard as hell
in the NFL and on Twitter. So when dudes start just every time someone gets attacked as a bad quarterback, he ends up being good, I feel like. So in Dynasty, I'm legit just going to close my eye. If we have multiple top 10 draft picks, I'm probably going to close my eyes and just whatever one my finger lands on, that's the guy I'm going to draft, because everybody is horrible at projecting quarterbacks. That's my takeaway from this.
And Nate already tipped the cap to Evan Silva, who called the Leonard Fournette getting cut. Evan Silva was also well far out ahead of Josh Allen for MVP. I don't know how the fuck this guy does it, or how he lands on such a ridiculous platform like Josh Allen for MVP. But man, through 3 games, Silva looks like he's running the button again. Nato, does that make the Leonard Fournette take even hurt more, knowing that you also were, fighting against Josh? I mean, this is just rough, man. This is rough.
Come on, I take no L's. He's listen, man. Silva's the GOAT for a reason, but no, it's crazy because here's what happens. Russell Wilson has a legit shot at MVP. I think in 2018. Was it 18 or 17? I can't remember. And fucking Cam Newton plays out of his mind, scores like 45 touchdowns or some insane thing. Then here we go again, Russell Wilson just last year playing out of his mind. And here comes Lamar Jackson, plays out of his mind, scores a ton of touchdowns. And you feel like, okay, this is the year. Russ is playing incredibly. There shouldn't be any competition. And then here we go. Here's Josh Allen, who's playing super well, and he's legitimately in the conversation. And I swear to God, if Russell Wilson doesn't fucking win MVP this year, I'm going to lose my mind. Do a 2-hour stream of me just swearing at everybody that had a vote. He hasn't even had a vote yet. Russell Wilson hasn't had a vote yet.
He's gonna win. Don't worry. Right? There's no person that's not a psychotic maniac right now that would actually put Josh Allen above Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is playing like if aliens came down and only saw the first 3 games of this NFL season, they would be like, Russell Wilson is the best player that's ever played the game. Like, that's where we're at right
I don't disagree. Russ is playing incredibly. So that's literally the only thing I have going for me. Josh Allen's also getting 38 pass attempts per game right now, which is fucking shocking. Okay, Andy's still running the ball. Week 1, 14 carries.
The Steph Diggs effect, man. The Steph Diggs is fucking good as hell, and the Vikings just said, "Nah, we don't. We're good with what we got." Which I guess if the Justin Jefferson thing works out, then
talk about one of the bigger misses on the year. All I heard was that Stephon Diggs is not going to thrive in Buffalo. That this is going to be problematic. That Josh Allen is erratic. That the target share won't be there. And Stephon Diggs to this point in the season is fucking wrecking shop. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I feel like I've been lied to. I mean, how high?
He's just. This is the first time he's ever been on the field where he's like the clear alpha. He's like the clear number one, doesn't have to share. Like, as long as he could prove that he's Stephon Diggs and he's doing what he's been doing for the last couple of years, no one can touch him. Where when he was in Minnesota, like, Thielen's a good fucking wide receiver, and he's always had to compete with him. And the chemistry between Thielen and Kirk Cousins, like, you just can't come between that, even if Diggs was the better wide receiver on the field. So I think this is, his chance to step in and be like, I am the true number one, because no one's even within fucking miles of me right now. John Brown is cute and all, but listen, he's not half the player that Diggs is.
Kirk Cousins is a mega stink bomb too, but Stephon Diggs is number 4 overall in wide receiver scoring, total points, number 4 in fantasy points per game at the position. This is insanity. All these people led me astray. They cost me lots of money, lots of dinero. Doesn't make me feel good at night. It's something that keeps me up perpetually is a better word. Constantly.
You'll be buying so many more cards.
I was about to say, we're going to make it back. The revenue's going to be big with the cards, baby.
I love it, baby. I know. I'm looking to get a big W on those. Don't make me pull my box of cards out and spend the next hour just
Why don't you buy a few Stephon Diggs cards right now and then fucking throw it in their faces?
I should, except the market's probably so juiced, artificially right now.
You're selling high. Yeah. I mean, you're buying high.
Yeah, you're buying too high. You gotta buy when they're low. So, okay, we talked about this off show. This is a topic I know you've been waiting to get to. Ryan appropriately stuffed it towards the end of the show sheet here. Justin Jefferson blew up this week. Was this somebody you were high on, and can we expect more of this going forward?
So I was high on him in the summer, and then the combine kind of blew me away. And if you just followed reports, like any normal person would obviously had to kind of temper expectations throughout the summer because he landed on the IR COVID list. And then this Sunday, man, like, they finally let this man play. And for the first 2 weeks, he was playing behind Olabisi Johnson, behind Chad Beebe. And the snap count, he finally got in on like 80% of the snaps this weekend. He became the number 2 de facto. I went back and watched the game because, like, you don't see numbers like that very often from a rookie. So I had to go back and I had to watch. And I own Thielen in a bunch of places. And I'm like, I'm a little bit worried right now for Thielen's sake. And I've said this on my channel, but I don't know. Do you guys follow Brett Coleman? Are you familiar with who Brett Coleman is?
I don't follow him.
He does he does some breakdowns, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he's got like a real big YouTube channel, and he does a lot of film analysis, and he's really fucking good at it. And I talked to him in the DM sometime, and in like August, he was like, "Yo, make sure you scoop Justin Jefferson everywhere. Like in season long as your wide receiver 5, he's gonna be the wide receiver 1 in that offense by Thanksgiving. He's like Keenan Allen." He's like Keenan Allen with better, I forget what he said, better something. And I was like, no, fuck it. Like, you're out of your mind, dude. Like, get out of my DMs. And I'm looking back at this game. I was blown the fuck away when I went back and watched him play. This was not a lucky game. It gave me Terry McLaurin vibes. Like the first time I watched a game of Terry McLaurin when he blew up. And Jefferson, I was looking at numbers. I was like, dude, this dude's so young. So that 175-yard receiving game he had, 3rd youngest player ever to do it. It was Juju. It was Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson. Guy behind him, Randy Moss. Like, this is very decent, very good company. And the crazy part about it is when Kirk was dropping back on Sunday, Jefferson was his first read every single time. Like the 4 targets that Thielen got, it was a made up screenplay. Like they already had that play going. The touchdown he had was a broken play that Kirk Cousins had to roll out of the pocket at. Like Jefferson, like it really like took the words out of my mouth. Like this, I'm like stumbling and shit right now. I was super impressed by Jefferson, and he's a guy I would literally buy high on in Dynasty right now before he continues to do it for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I know Nate probably has a little bit to add because I think he had a couple different pieces on Patreon and everywhere else where it was like Justin Jefferson kind of felt like a forgotten player in most dynasty drafts. And again, it was a good wide receiver class, and I guess Jefferson kind of got swept aside. And I know the questions with him was how would he fit, at least initially, into Minnesota, given the role that he played in Louisiana State, knowing that Thielen mans the slot, and that's kind of Cousins guy out of there. Can Jefferson play and thrive on the outside? And I don't know what the alignment was this past week or where he was operating out of. I assume mostly on the outside, if not all on the outside. But again, I think, the question has quickly been answered, and I think we'll see going forward. I haven't heard the wide receiver 1 by Thanksgiving take. That is a little bit spicy to me, but I fucking love it. Just because I think Thielen, can be leapfrog like that. And I think Thielen is still a good player. So that probably says a lot more about Justin Jefferson, but
yeah, so just to hop in before Nate hops on there for the alignment, he was mainly slot for week 1 and week 2, and then basically 88% of his routes were on out wide in week 3.
Beautiful. Yeah. So that, and again, if I remember correctly, Nato, that was one of the big concerns with Jefferson, was just how he's going to transition to a pure, I don't want to say pure outside role, but operating more outside than he was, playing inside with, someone like Jamar Chase outside and kind of doing what he was doing. So, again, it certainly seems to be wheels up. I don't think buying high is the wrong approach at all. It's just kind of knowing. I guess the question really is, how much faith do you have in Kirk Cousins? Can he keep things going? Can he keep the boat afloat? And Nate is shaking his head that he doesn't have much.
I have very little confidence in Kirk Cousins. I mean, the next game's in Houston. That'll be more difficult matchup. But then they're playing in Seattle, and Seattle can't stop shit. So if you wanted to buy Justin Jefferson, you could possibly wait one more week. But if you wait until after week 5 or going into Atlanta in week 6, I mean, it's going to be terrible. He's going to be hard to purchase at that point. But yeah, this is a guy that back in college, I believe he ran like 98.5% of his snaps his final year out of the slot. So there were a lot of questions about how would he do versus man press coverage on the outside where, he doesn't have this free release like he does playing out of the slot. But clearly, it hasn't mattered. I mean, on the year, as Nick had brought up, he technically has run more out of the slot than Adam Thielen, but we've seen a change. And I think all along when you listen offseason, there were plenty of beliefs that this guy could play on the outside. I don't think it was really necessarily a question. I think the question was what we saw in college, and they thought that it wasn't going to translate. But this is a guy that played at LSU, played in an incredibly difficult conference, faced the toughest corners week over week. And we're starting to learn as we see Joe Burrow, as we see Jefferson, as we see Clyde Edwards, and everybody tries to build these narratives that Clyde Edwards was a byproduct of the offense and the offensive line, and Joe Burrow was a byproduct of the offensive line and the receivers, and Justin Jefferson was a byproduct of Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase. Maybe they were all just fucking good. Maybe everybody was just really, really good, right? Like, it's not surprising that Burrow's number 1, Clyde Edwards is awesome, Justin Jefferson is awesome. Oops. So if you bought into the absurd narrative, then it probably bit you in the butt. But I mean, Justin Jefferson wasn't a first round guy. I know in some of the drafts that I was in rookie drafts, I saw him going 109, 110, but typically he was right there at the turn. And that was even in non-super flex. So, if we redrafted everything right now, it would be shocking to see how things would break down. I think guys like Ruggs would fall way further out. I saw Ruggs go a lot higher. Guys like Jefferson would move in. Shenault would probably move in. Edwards would move in. So it's just...
Yeah, so I did that. I put that tweet out. I put a tweet out last week, like redoing a rookie draft. And I put the guy... It was pretty similar. I had Akers move down a little bit. I had... It was tough to choose like the 111, 112 spots. And Jefferson wasn't in there for me because, I mean, how could you have put him in after the summer in week 1 and week 2? After this game, man, like, I'm really – I don't walk away from film like too often very, very just like eye-popping, man. And I really feel like Jefferson's got a clean role here. And like you brought up the schedule, man. It's Houston. I talked about this in my waiver wire vid today, so I like have it off the top. It's like Houston, Seattle, Atlanta. They get a bye. Green Bay, Detroit. Chicago's like their one tough game in the next 11 weeks. After that, it's Dallas, Carolina, Jacksonville. Like, dude, it's wheels up for the next 10 weeks for this offense. And they were so desperate for another passing option. Like, you could tell in the first 2 weeks, it was so grainy. It just Kirk trying to force feed targets to Adam Thielen. Like, he didn't want, as much as he wanted to do it, he like stopped wanting to do it quickly, and he found his next guy in Jefferson. And I feel like this is going to be a real competition for number one there.
And we talked about this too when the NFL draft was going on. Some of these trades, it was kind of like, and Ryan mentioned this with Stephon Diggs, it was just kind of a flip-flop. It was like, okay, we're going to let this guy go. We're going to get the draft pick. We're going to replace him with a rookie. And we saw this happen a couple different times throughout the draft. So seeing Justin Jefferson take off is awesome, man. That guy is really good. If he's the number one wide receiver overall, I will crap my pants though. That's super spicy. Okay, that's
the take was wide receiver one in Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah. I would have fallen off my chair.
I wouldn't have brought some nonsense up.
I would have put a diaper on. Okay, let's go to the last question here. So Cedric Wilson, is he good? Is he not good? This is one of the most stacked groups of wide receivers in Dallas. You got Michael Gallup, you've got Amari Cooper, we've got CeeDee Lamb, and now Cedric Wilson. What are your thoughts on him? Is he a guy to stash in Dynasty?
Yeah, I mean, crazy ride for Cedric Wilson going back to his history. Balled out at community college for a couple of years, transferred to Boise State, balled out for another couple of years. He gets drafted by the Cowboys, ends in 2018, ends both of 2018 and 2019 on the IR. 2020 starts, and then the rest is history after what he did on Sunday, 5 for 107 and 2. Shout out to Wikipedia for all that fucking information right there. Like, he looked good, but like, I mean, realistically, I don't know. What are you going to do with him? Like, we're already trying to figure out like what wide receiver to own in Dallas between Cooper and Lamb and Gallup, and it's just like he's the number 4 there on his best week, right? So he's a talent that maybe you hope ends up in another situation, or like best case scenario, what if one of these guys gets moved? Like, he moves into the 3. Are you confident about him being? I mean, he's on the waiver wire for every Dynasty league, which is great because you actually have the opportunity to go get him. So I would say, like, listen, it's between like him and fucking, I don't know, like Cole Beasley's probably already added, so that's a bad metaphor here. But it's between him and guys that like you want no part of, right? So
I was gonna ask you, like, him or Gabe Davis. Like, right? Like, Gabriel Davis is kind of one of these guys in sort of that same group. I mean, I don't know if Gabriel Davis is owned everywhere, but this is, I don't know. I guess these two players, who would you prefer out of those two? Gabriel Davis or Cedric Wilson?
So that's a good question, because Gabriel Davis has looked pretty good so far in the early parts of the season. And I want to look up right now what John Brown's contract situation is. So they could have some end of 2021, but they can cut him and save about $8.5 million if they cut him this offseason. He's a good player, so maybe it doesn't really make sense for them to just straight up cut him. But I think like Gabriel Davis has a much clearer path to actually, because John Brown's hurt right now. So Gabriel Davis can make a name for himself while Josh Allen is red hot and like cement the role in this offense. Can Cedric Wilson do that again? Like, if they just go 3 wide receiver sets really heavy over the next month of the season, does Cedric Wilson get on the field for more than 20% of the snaps? I think this seems like a very quick overreaction to a Cedric Wilson game right now. So I'll take Gabriel Davis.
And admittedly, I had to, Nate, I feel like when I was on the early stages of the Patreon account, we would fucking ask these questions and we would get a bunch of replies from the awesome patrons. There'd always be just some random ass like Dynasty buy. Like, so Cedric Wilson to me felt like this question might appeal to like 1 or 2 listeners in the show. So I figured I can give them a little, hey, enjoy the Cedric Wilson, banter back and forth, But what I really wanted to ask, I mean, is this, number one, is this the best wide receiver group in the league, just assuming health and assuming you got Lamb, Gallup, Cooper, and then you have someone like Wilson who apparently can elevate and step up when called upon. So that's kind of my first question. Second question is where do you look or how do you approach this group dynasty wise? You know what I mean? Like, is there going to be, is Gallup, is the team long for Gallup? Is Cooper going to stick around, knowing that they have Lamb? Is it going to be the Lamb and Gallup show going forward? Is Wilson going to somehow rise and insert himself into a wide receiver 3? That's probably, again, like Nick said, a large overreaction off of last week. But I just find the Dallas group fascinating, knowing that they have, much like the Russell Wilson talk, you have someone as good as Dak Prescott, you want to attach yourself to as many of those pass catchers as you can. And this group is just loaded, man. There's so many different options.
Yeah, so I think the way to look at them dynasty-wise is If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the way I would think Dallas is looking at it right now. I don't think they're actively trying to break this fucking group apart, right? There's no reason for that. The problem on this team is clearly their defense. If they can get their defensive things, whether it's being healthy or, just hitting on some draft picks at cornerback or whatever it needs to be, like this offense will more than do its part. So I'm imagining they're going to try to keep this group together as long as possible. And for me, that would clearly put Gallup as the number 3. Like a lot of the things that people talked about this offseason kind of came to fruition. Like we were worried about Gallup because CeeDee Lamb was so talented. And we've seen CeeDee Lamb be like a very consistent piece of this offense and have like a really nice ceiling and a really nice floor. Dynasty-wise, I mean, Cooper seems like the alpha for now, but CeeDee Lamb is certainly talented enough to make this a 1A, 1B situation. I like CeeDee Lamb is someone that I'm really, really, really high on in Dynasty. He's definitely a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver for me right now, and I would take him very, very early in like startup drafts. So I'm more hesitant on Cooper. He's obviously like the older of the bunch, and I feel like not that he's a ticking time bomb, but like his value doesn't seem like it can actually go up right now, right?
Right. And, and Amari, he's got, I think Amari might have next to CeeDee Lamb, they're neck and neck for the expiration on their contract. So it's close between these two. And we talked about this in the past. Like Dallas didn't expect to have CeeDee Lamb fall in their lap. We thought CeeDee Lamb was probably going to Oakland. We thought he could have gone to anybody else. Sorry, Ryan. But CeeDee Lamb, I mean, he fell to Dallas. And now they've got this wealth of riches where they've got him, they've got Gallup, they've got Cooper. The reality is that they still need to pay Dak Prescott. And there's going to be other guys in this offense that need to get paid as well. So the question is, what do you do? Gallup's actually the one whose contract expires first, and I believe it's in 2022. So the odds are there's a chance that Dallas trades Gallup to get value for him. I mean, and the problem with Gallup too is he feels like he's going to be the most hit or miss from week to week, for me, at least in Dallas, because I think that
he's like unstartable almost.
He is.
He's almost unstartable in fantasy. That's the problem.
Yeah, what do you do? And I think that Dallas realizes this as well. Even though they want to throw the ball a lot, they want Dak to throw the ball a lot, they need to find value somewhere. They need to open up this payroll. And when it comes time to pay Michael Gallup, if he continues to kind of flash this ability, Michael Gallup's not going to want to take some team-friendly deal to stay with Dallas if he can go get a number 1 style contract somewhere else. So I think that might be the first guy to go, especially, again, his contract ending 3 years earlier than the rest of these guys. That might be the reality of the situation. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. I'd imagine Gallup is probably the first one out of there if he can. He's one of those players that like good enough to command a contract elsewhere that's probably actually above his talent level, but it's what the market value is, and someone else will want to grab him on it. So the Cowboys will probably let him go because they're going to have to re-sign a whole bunch of fucking players. So it could be a problem. I think the debate between like Cooper, here's the way I look at it. Like Cooper and CeeDee Lamb next summer going into startups, they're probably going to be picked around the same-ish area, right? Like maybe Lamb is like wide receiver 10 and Cooper wide receiver 11, 12, right? Like only one of those guys' values is probably going up and the other one's probably going down. So if you can get in on that value swap like way earlier than when it's actually going to happen, it seems like the smarter move right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they're both so talented, and Dallas throws the ball enough, and Dak is good enough to keep these two guys afloat. But again, it is a rarity, and it does happen annually, but when I say rarity, not amongst the total league, for two guys to finish top 15 at the position. It's happened. We've seen it with Diggs and Thielen. We've seen it with AB and Juju, a bunch of other times in between there, but it doesn't happen all the time, but this would sort of be that pairing. If it was going to happen, this would be the two guys. But I'm with you. I love Amari Cooper, but I think CeeDee Lamb is going to get the nudge going into 2021. So if you got him in your rookie drafts, man, the sky's the limit for him. Ryan, you got any other take on Dallas, man? You wrote the question.
Nothing, man. Everyone, I think we all held hands and we walked through that together.
I hate going out
perfectly.
that way. That's not how I do shows typically. I did put a line.
You've been hanging around Matt way too much.
I know.
Pass the mic to Nick, man. Let Nick get the people fired up and bring us out on a really high note.
Do your thing, Nick.
All right. Well, I always appreciate chopping it up with you guys. You guys are on the real two of my favorite people within the industry right now, and that's why when some weird shady shit happens, I end up DMing you guys. Because
yeah, the DMs, man, are my fucking favorite part. And I wanted to, not to cut you off, I wanted to start off with this, man. Like I fucking, before you guys got into the Leonard Fournette thing, Nate and I, we call each other, talk to each other multiple times a week, and he's always like, yo, like, so who do you think of for the next guest? I think every week's before, like, even week one, like, I was like, yo, we got to fucking Nick on, man. Like, Nick, I've asked for Nick, I think, every single week. So when we finally linked up, man, I was kind of fanboying out. I'm like, yo, we got Nick back, bro. The show's going to be awesome. Like, I'm excited. So legit, man, always a pleasure to sit down and just fucking talk ball with you, man.
Yeah, we hit it off well. We're like very I think we're all very even keel, and we're like down to earth. So I know when I DM you guys about something that's like borderline questionable, like I don't need to be politically correct. Right? So like I relate to you guys on that level. And there's not a lot of dudes in the industry that I could say that about. So always a pleasure coming on here.
Appreciate it, man. Well, you got anything you want to plug? This is it.
No, I mean, most of my stuff is on YouTube. So I'm also going to post this video on YouTube. So if you're watching, you guys can obviously go follow Ryan and Nate. I have their stuff linked in the description. But on the Roto Underworld radio stuff, y'all can find me on YouTube. Just Nick Ercolano, ERCOLANO. And that's really it.
Love it, man. All right. Always great having you on, Nick. Good show as usual. Clearly you did your homework. I'm blown away. The statistics, the depth, the knowledge, man. You did fantastic tonight. Look forward to having you back. Maybe down the road after Leonard Fournette just stacks some just good games on top of each other. Like after he strings like three.
I'm sorry. That was a hot mic.
Three good ones together. I'm bringing you back. We'll bring you back.
All right, man. We'll have a little more negativity.
I love it, man. All right, look forward to it.
All right, later.